like last year. A new class at FHS, Gulf of Maine Field Studies, has been having fieldwork days at Wolf's Neck Farm. This morning we went and explored the intertidal zone and learned about some invasive species. Homecoming dance is next Saturday, October 5th, or 2 Saturdays from now. The cross-country meet will be on Friday evening. The football game on Friday at 6 p.m. Girls soccer, 12 p.m. that Saturday. Boys at 3. And the field hockey will be at 10 a.m. on Saturday, October 5th. So if you want to spend like 7 hours at the turf, come do that. And then I just want to also acknowledge that this week is 2 years since we lost our classmate Theo Ferrara. So it's a hard week for a lot of kids at Freeport, but we also have this great community, and I've definitely been feeling like still very uplifted by the community. Everyone's a little extra here for each other this week, which is really special. So thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. I also think our field hockey coach was named the coach of the year. Oh, was that in your report?
It is not, but
Oh, yeah. I think I saw that last week. So congratulations to Marsha Wood, who is a math teacher also here at Freeport High School. So, all right. So we will move on to public comment. Not seeing any. We will continue on with number 8 on our agenda, report from the superintendent.
Letter A, number 1, one resignation to announce, Sarah McManus, Moore Street School Educational Technician. And we added a number 2, school safety. I just want to talk a little bit about the lenses we look through when we're looking at school safety and some of the preventative measures that we have. And also knowing that in our community, fairly recently, there was a threat against Freeport High School. So I'm going to talk about, not about that particular incident, but in general, how those sorts of things are handled. So that when we're looking at school safety, the overarching goal is that we're creating a safe school environment for all our students and our staff. And there are 2 lenses we look through. There's the prevention bucket, and then there's the response bucket. So the prevention bucket is let's make sure to the very best of our ability that there is no unsafe incident at any of our schools. So looking at prevention, how do we do that? We do that in a variety of ways. First of all, we build community with kids because we know that that is one way to prevent any acts of school violence. Examples of how we do that are working with responsive classroom, our work in advisory. Those are some of the ways that we do that. We also ensure a safe physical environment, looking at things like safety, looking at access controls to our doors, secured doors, security cameras, fire alarm systems, PA systems, phone systems, radios, etc. Those are some of those examples. We create and practice safety plans, looking at the what ifs. For example, what happens if we have a bus accident? What happens if there's a fire, an intruder, a bomb threat? There are all sorts of different lanes for safety that we look at. And we practice those things. For example, bus evacuations, we practice those every year. Fire drills, and then ALICE protocols, which are developmentally appropriate in our schools. And we also have to understand, how do we recognize warning signs of possibly harmful behavior? Just like we would pull the fire alarm to evacuate if we smell smoke, we look at what is being said, what is being posted on social media. We're looking at kids or people. Are their actions within the norm? Is something unexpected? Does something not feel right? And then we encourage our staff and our students to, if they see something or something doesn't look right or feel right, to say something. We also, for example, recently, there was an online posting of a threat of violence. There's a different response to that. There is a different response for that, but all of those are through the lens of school safety. I'll give the example of the threat against the school. Anytime there's a threat against a school, the first thing we do is notify law enforcement. immediately. And remember that a threat can happen anytime. Doesn't always happen between 8 and 3. Sometimes it's on a weekend. Sometimes it's late at night. But we're taking that action in that moment. And for the example at the Freeport High School threat, we had students that saw something and said something, and they contacted their principal, they contacted their assistant principal. We also had parents that saw it because their children shared that post with them. What happens with then, obviously, we're contacting law enforcement, and the high school is contacting me, and we're springing into action right there. We have to take precautions to protect all potential victims, including my number one question when I spoke with the Freeport Police Department that night at, I think it rang in at precisely 12:07 on my phone. Is it safe for me to bring students and staff in tomorrow? It's always made in collaboration with law enforcement. Now, that information wasn't pushed out at 12:07 because our students, our families, our staff are sleeping at that time. But we were prepared to do that early in the morning so families would know that it was safe. There's a comprehensive investigation, and there are really 2 lanes in that investigation anytime there's a threat. If it's criminal, obviously the police department, they're doing their own investigation to determine that. We're also doing an investigation on the school side. We're often doing it in conjunction with them, but there are certain things they're looking to see. Is it criminal? Are there charges that have to be filed? We're looking to see if it's a student involved, is there some sort of disciplinary action, because that's our role for that. The whole process is confidential. And primarily at that time when we're investigating, we want to maintain the integrity of the investigation that's occurring. It's important for all of us to remember, anytime a student is involved, we have a legal obligation to protect that student's educational record through FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And that includes any disciplinary action for students. We also, anytime a student is involved, must provide that student their due process rights. They have a right to respond if we are alleging that something occurred. So the police will say, are there charges to be filed? We say, what's the appropriate disciplinary action? And I was reflecting on this whole situation that we've had the flickering of lights yesterday, which was in school safety, and we have protocols, reflecting on the threat that we had here. And I thought, I've been going to school for 54 years. I've been going to school for 54 years, either as a student or in some capacity as a teacher, principal, superintendent. And I think, what are my priorities? I want to say I'm here to be your instructional leader. But above academics, above winning the One-Act plays, the gold ball, above having the best tech tools, the best library collection, above all else, the safety of this district's children and staff is my priority, just as I would want my own children, my own family protected. So that's just a little bit about school safety. And I will say, you will be, one thing our facilities committee will be seeing is we've through the energy audit, we were obviously identifying things like boilers that need to be replaced and so forth, or lighting, but we're also looking at life safety measures, working with our school resource officer as well to help us identify in all our buildings what are some of those things we might want to look at to improve. So we're putting together a complete list of those things, and definitely those are some things through the capital improvement plan you'll see that we want to improve going forward. I will also say, in terms of it's sort of like the incident response for all those possible things could happen in schools. Our response is something that our administrative team reviews yearly. We did so in August, and say, are there protocols that we need to sharpen a little bit, and we'll be continuing to do that this year. That's all I have, unless there are any questions.
Any questions? Mara?
Thank you, Jean. I really appreciate that, and I think that's really reassuring, especially with things that we've seen happening going on around the country that are just so scary. I just wanted to ask, for you, if you could clarify, when you say FERPA protected, that means that there potentially could be some action taken by the school with relation to the threat, but you can't tell the public. Is that right?
So let's say any discipline, just like any disciplinary action that occurred for, let's say I won't use a school safety, I'll use another benign sort of example. Let's say that we had a student who skipped school, and there may be some disciplinary action that's taken by the school, where it's, there could be a detention, there could be a suspension, there could be all kinds of those things. But that is an educational record for that kid. So that's why it would not be something that we would tell anyone else. If we are dealing with, let's say if there's in a school, if there's a bullying investigation that we do, we would do that investigation. Could be potentially, we found that it did occur, there could be a disciplinary action against a student, but that would not be something we would share with the public, because those are the things that even disciplinary records are part of a kid's educational records. But I will say, in the case, I'll just say for the public, and I've shared with the board, is that I have absolutely we will not tolerate any threats of violence, and we will certainly, as a school district, press charges if someone threatens violence against our schools, and we will take appropriate disciplinary action.
Okay, so we will continue on with number 9, administrator reports, and we'll start with Kelly, finance.
Good evening. Included in your packet this evening is the report for the months of both July and August. There was no meeting in August, so we've included both months in this presentation tonight. As you can see, we have just begun the school year. In ordering, they've gotten the back to school items that they needed, and we've encumbered all of the staff wages and benefits associated with running the school for the entire year, and really premature in the process for really analyzing where we're at. We see no issues at this time, and we will continue to monitor things as we move forward. And I'm pleased to announce that it wasn't part of the superintendent's report, but we're at one of our lowest points of needing staff members. So they're largely reflected in here. Exactly.
Any questions for Kelly? Thank you. All right, so we will move on to 9B, which is the update from the Moore Street School and the goal review from Principal Nickerson.
Okay. I'm going to start with some photos for you so you can kind of put into context where we're at. So I'll get into the detail of the goal review, but I wanted to share some photos of things we've already started this year, and you'll see that when I get into goals, it's connected with our goals. And I just felt like if you can see the pictures of, you'll just be able to visualize how things are going at school. So this is Magic. If you haven't met Magic, this is Magic the Moose that shows up at Moore Street once in a while to engage with the kids. They're still guessing on who might be inside Magic, but that's like the big secret. So so Magic comes to our assemblies, and we did engage, we did a walk to school with Magic last year, and so it's been a fun way to kind of get kids excited and fun. So family engagement is one of our big goals this year, and so already we've had a few opportunities as school has opened, and families have, the last couple of years we kept our open house virtual based on feedback we had received around it being more accessible for many families and not needing to worry about childcare, but then we realize it's time to really have families back in school and really engaging with our classrooms in a way that feels really purposeful for both them and our students. So we had 2 opportunities for open house. We did a pre-K night, which was just for parents. We decided that because they have 2 reasons. Because there's 2 sessions of pre-K, it's hard to have all those families at once with children, and 4-year-olds at 6 and 7 at night is better that they're at home. And so parents were able to come and really engage with the teachers and have some experiences of, that replicated the experiences their children have during the day, and were able to ask their questions and really hear about what our big goals are for pre-K. And engage with the teachers and other families. And then a second night, the same week, we did our open house for K2, which is like open house / curriculum night. So it was a way for our learners to show their families their classrooms and what they've been doing so far. Then also teachers had an opportunity to kind of share specifics about learning for the year. And our STEM teacher, that Lego build, she had done a community build, so families were invited to put one piece of Lego on the construction, and then it kind of built as the night went on. So it was just a fun way to get families back in school, and the energy was really big, and it just felt like it was a good way to start and our goals around family engagement, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. We've also done, this is supporting our academic goals. So in kindergarten this year, we have really thought about our first 6 weeks of school as a transition time from our half day, very play focused pre-K to what does that then transition to for children being at school all day. And then, I mean, our curriculum is pretty rigorous. So what we noticed at the end of last year in the spring, I had done some professional development with our pre-K team, and I had invited some of our kindergarten students in to be, we did lab classroom, so to come and like be the students so that our pre-K teachers could practice teaching play workshop. And what we noticed was many of our kindergartners didn't have the skills that we were getting ready to teach into with our pre-Kers. So we really thought about, okay, so how can we transition at the beginning of the year in a way that really feels purposeful and thoughtful about teaching into some of the social emotional skills that children are still lagging as they're leaving pre-K and coming into K, so that it sets them up with this really strong foundation to be confident, to make plans. So that's kind of part of, it replicates for those of you who've been to visit at Moore Street, you will have walked through our workshops. And so play workshop in kindergarten looks just like it would do in literacy. So that they're being introduced to that model of a mini lesson, and then they're having to think about something, and then they go off and play, and then the teacher might pull them for a small group, but it's all, the content is play and what teachers are observing. So there's open-ended stations that, like, there's a construction station, a creation station, and an imagination station. And really our kindergarten classrooms aren't set up in the same way as our pre-K classrooms to have this be like all over the room. But we ended up like these 3 kind of stations feel like address like the importance of being at school and how those patterns and habits need to start as young as, pre-K, really. So we're trying to educate families in ways of like, okay, the research shows if the pattern starts in pre-K, the likelihood of them not attending well later is also true. So we're kind of tackling it in a couple of ways. We've tightened up some of the systems of how we're tracking and then reaching out to families way sooner than we have done in the past, just to be like, hey, like a little kind of a check-in. How are things? What's going on? What can we help with? And then also being like, just some families want help. Some families are like, no, we're taking a vacation. Sorry, kind of thing. So, but we're kind of navigating both of those kind of scenarios in a way that feels right with our, connections with those families. So we're making it a focus in newsletters, so it's just on people's radars all the time. And then we also think increasing our family engagement is also going to help with attendance. Like the more families understand and know the importance of the work we're doing, might make people think twice about that third day off or even being out at all. So that was kind of our focus around like attendance and hoping to decrease that rate. And then also that brings us to family and school connection. So in the parent satisfaction survey, it came up in our written feedback. There was a number of comments about families seeking more opportunities to engage at school, even though the percentage on that kind of question was still pretty high. I mean, it was 89% of families felt that it was enough, but we didn't have that high of a rate of response. So listening to like people who bother to kind of make comments is like, okay, like then we probably need to kind of really address this. And we were already thinking about it anyway, in terms of, just being way more transparent around where children are, where the actual achievement is in any given point in the year in relation to where we're hoping to get them. And really, we have tackled this goal in a let's do something different and let's just offer as many different opportunities and see what gets interest and what doesn't. And I think also in the past we've offered different things and have had limited attendance, and I think it's always been like, well, it wasn't well attended, why would we bother? And I think we've shifted our mindset to let's offer a lot of different things, and even if we get 12 people, it's worth doing it because we were able to connect and engage with those families in a way that maybe we wouldn't if we didn't offer it. So we're just going to see. And so already we've had a lot of we had a very strong attendance at our open house and curriculum night. And then next week, our kind of our social emotional support team are offering just a casual kind of coffee and like, hey, if raising children is really hard, and if you want to just come and talk about things, we're here just to kind of see what people are looking for support. We did survey families, so we kind of have a gauge of kind of what people are maybe looking for. And then our specials, so PE and music the week after are opening their doors to pre-K families. Like, just come and see what your kid is doing in PE and music. So we're trying to do a little bit more of that. I think oftentimes when we get questions and kind of concern about curriculum, 9 times out of 10, it's probably because we didn't communicate well enough about what and why we do things. And so the hope is that the more we open our doors and make things like just, hey, you don't have to come and volunteer, you don't have to like do some, but just come and sit and experience the way your child learns in a day, and then we can kind of we'll see where things go. Hopefully it will feel better for families, and it can be a way just to get people who might not normally come in, especially if it's like a one-off and there's no regular commitment. And then the other thing I just want to highlight really on our academic goal that's really encompasses all of this work is most of what we're carrying on will be continued work, but we've specifically changed our thinking around, so we've done a lot of work around social emotional development and what that means for children at our age group. And the one thing that I think over the past couple of years, children who have struggled most and we are seeing kind of challenging behaviors from is usually because they struggle when they feel challenged. And so we're always teaching into what it means to be a learner what does it mean to be a kindergarten learner? What does it mean to be a first grade learner? And what we realized also was our habits of work, which we assess and put on the report card, really is where that work lands. And we hadn't really made it as student facing as we probably should have. And so that's kind of a focus for us this year, to really kind of tie everything back to these are the habits of work. This is what it looks like when you're in pre-K. This is what it looks like when you're in K. And we have that kind of clear thing that's only been adult facing, in a sense of like, okay, where are they at now? And so we're kind of bringing that back to be part of our conversations with kids. Just like, are you doing this? Like, are you sitting? Are you sharing your materials? Are you initiating getting started with your work without the teacher prompting you? So our hope is that, you know, that will help settle kids. Like, it's really like the target is clear. This is what we're expecting from you. It'll be a way for children to measure their own growth. And then also hopefully then settle them into learning and being able to make mistakes and persevere through challenge quicker. And I'd already talked about the play workshop, which was the other thing. And also we've strengthened kind of our approach in our PLCs. And so we realized last year that a really close look at assessment, and there's a fine line between assessing all the time and not teaching, and teaching and then not assessing enough. So we've kind of really looked at what data are we collecting and when are we like coming back to have conversations so that we can really closely monitor kids and their progress and give them the support in a just-in-time kind of way if they need extra. I think one of the things the longer I stay in this role and the more I work with kids and teachers at this level, I just think the sooner we can prevent a gap from forming or close it if it's there, the better kids will be longer term. So, you know, that really is our focus, to be like catch them quick, give them extra, and simultaneously with that, we're building the capacity of our teachers to be able to differentiate and support all learners in classrooms. Okay. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Julie. Questions for Julie? Carolyn.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. What you're doing, I think that's really important stuff, and really good job.
Thanks.
Yeah, what really sort of resonated with me when you were talking about the engagement piece is not giving up on an idea just because only a few people came the first time. Like, sometimes it takes a little while to catch on to how cool these opportunities are, you know, and I really appreciate your perspective that even if only 12 come, that's 12 families you might not have touched otherwise, and so it's time well spent. I mean, obviously you can't have events every day because you'll burn people out, but you know, a thoughtful approach, sort of a wide net, I hope will yield good results for you guys.
Yeah, hopefully.
Other, Kara.
Oh, there we go. I'll just use Danielle's for now. Thank you so much. This is really great. I would really like to meet Magic the Moose at some point. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the differentiated instruction around literacy and what's happening for that with the team unit planning and with the professional development.
Yeah, so I'll broad brush it because I know you're going to have a more in-depth presentation pretty soon. So, and I don't have the timeline in my head that you will get when you have that presentation. So, so we're differentiating all the time. You know, when I think about, I wish actually someone said to me earlier, it would be so cool if you could just show them our data walls without kids' names on. You would just see how much information we have on kids, especially at our grade levels, around the discrete skills that kids need in order to be readers. And so we collect multiple data points that are informing, because really at our level, children need to have all their component work in place, so their phonics, so you need to know all the phonemic awareness pieces, which is letters and sounds without print. They need all their phonics patterns and knowledge, which is the sound parts in print. They need to have high frequency words. They need to be able to write them, read them. So we're collecting all that. They need to be able to do nonsense words fluently, so it would just so that they know those sounds. All of that information is being gathered, and then our primary curriculum is units of study, which has just been, I know it's been under some scrutiny, but we are using the revised version, which has had a pretty robust overhaul around more approach with phonics. But in essence, there's never going to be a perfect curriculum, because when you swing one way and you have a primary phonics curriculum, then you're meeting the needs of many kids, but not all. What happens to those children who have learned a different way and need way more instruction around comprehension? So we're always approaching our instruction in a way that's responsive to the children in front of us. I had conversations with one of our kindergarten classrooms. The beginning units in our phonics curriculum is letter sounds, and it's one sound a day. I'm looking and I'm in the room and I'm like, all these kids already have their sounds. You don't even need to teach these lessons. So, we're thinking about who is in front of us, what do they need, and what's the next thing they need all the time. So, did that answer your question? And it's fluid, it's constant. And so, and then we're looking at, okay, who needs more, who doesn't have all the parts. That means they're going to access this grade level curriculum. So we're going to highlight, there's kids who we're identifying who need support, and they will go straight to our tier 2 support, which will be with our literacy specialist or our math specialist, or both. I know your question was around literacy, but and then right now we have identified a handful of our kindergartners who don't have their letters and sounds, and they're doing a 6-week boot camp because they should have that by now. So we're our literacy specialist has, I don't know, last year I know it was 16. I'm not sure 100% sure on the number for this year, but it's a bigger group, because that is skill and drill, and that's what they're doing, because they need that in order to access the next part of our literacy curriculum. So it's constantly fluid. We're reviewing it all the time. So that MTSS team is looking at that data all the time. Who's popping up? Who needs more? How can we support the teacher so that they can differentiate better? We've shifted our model for our instructional coaching this year. So we now have a coach in our building all the time. So that becomes a layer as part of when we look at our data. And sometimes we might see a whole class where there's ooh, here's a gap. Then we're going to put our coaching there. They might team teach. They might really focus with a lens on who are the students and what do they need, and how can we get them where they need to go.
Maura?
Thank you so much, Julie. I was just wondering about the reading benchmarks and scores and measures, if you could just talk a little bit about those, the difference between them, the two different ones that are on there.
The two assessments. So the BAS is an assessment that assesses students kind of as a whole reader, if you like. So they have an oral reading part. So, you know, a teacher would sit next to a student while they read a book, and they'll be checking off their accuracy rate as they're reading. And then they also then have comprehension questions. And we are really I think many people would be surprised at the expectation around depth of thinking that we are asking our kindergartners and our first and second graders around how they think about books. So we're really expecting them to dig deep and be able to have a lot of language in terms of how they're responding and thinking about their reading. So that's that. BAS kind of covers that assessment. We're also at certain point, their rate of reading is also assessed within that. So how fluent they are. And then the Acadience assessment is specifically around a more phonics base. So it's a timed assessment. So it's looking for automaticity. And there's sections to that assessment that is timed. So every piece, there's usually 3 pieces, and it's what children can do in a minute. So there's a letter naming fluency in kindergarten. So in a minute, how many letters can they name from this sheet? It's a very quick and down and kind of dirty assessment. And then they also have nonsense word fluency. So that might be, well, they're not real words. And then so students have to apply what they know about letter sounds to read a word. And then that's really where we understand whether children are they're not like just using their sight to remember. They have to actually apply their knowledge of sound to read those words. And then there's an oral reading fluency piece, which is a passage in those assessments too. So we're looking at both of those. Oftentimes we might be like, so if a child is struggling and we're like, okay, they haven't moved through the levels, we'll go to that assessment. And I'm like, okay, is it their rapid naming that is holding them back? Is there automaticity and their fluency in those areas that may or may not be holding them back? Oftentimes kids can get to a particular level and then they might stall. And then we're looking at each of those individual sections as to what might be holding them back. And then we would target our intervention there. I do think our data had grown in one and not the other. And I think I was reflecting on the why, and I do think some of that is contributed to staff turnover and kind of how we've educated and supported people around use of that assessment. And so we're kind of like, oh, paid attention and are thinking about that in a different way again this year.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
So the BAS is not in the upcoming year's goals. Is that intentional?
I think, did I? I think, no, it's not.
Oh, it says
I think it was
F&P.
increasing each of those data points by another 5%. So the BAS.
Oh, so BAS is the same, synonymous with F&P?
Yes.
Oh, Fountas and Pinnell.
Oh,
Okay.
I didn't change that. Sorry. Yes.
Nope,
We're
that's
now, yes, same thing.
Okay. And I'm guessing your attendance goal was less than 10%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I put it the wrong way?
Otherwise, you've already hit it. Good job.
No. Yes. Yes.
Any other questions? Yeah, Kelly.
Remind me, is this the second year we've had an assistant principal at Moore Street School?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious if you could speak to how having that person in the building has been helpful in helping you stay on track and meet these goals.
Yeah, so I have done at least 25 observations already this year, and that probably, I've been the principal at Moore Street for 10 years, and that's never been the case. So, that just in itself, especially when we've had such a high turnover of staff, is, super important to kind of get in early in terms of how we do things and where new teachers are at. So that in itself has been the impact. And really, if you remember, the ask was around there is need that across the school in terms of with challenging behavior particularly that can derail a day for hours at a time when you have to wait it out. And so I am now not that person who has to wait it out, which is great. And so Amanda is now that person who is doing the response to kind of the behavior pieces. But coupled with that, so Amanda's kind of primary parts, like, so she is kind of taking on the attendance piece and the kind of oversight of the MTS systems, if you like, and then behavior response. So we don't have an RTIB ed tech this year. We lost the ed tech we had mid-year last year, and then we haven't been able to hire for this year. And so we've kind of thought about how are we going to approach how we support students who are presenting with challenging behavior in a different way in the absence of a person. And so what we've done is put a layer of observation and coaching in the classroom to try and build the skill of the teacher first to keep that kiddo in the classroom versus coming out for reinforcement with a person. And so I think that, like, without it being an assistant principal, that piece of really trying to coach teachers has been a big piece that's certainly different and feels teachers, I'm sure, I haven't been like, oh, do you feel more supported? But I can't believe their answer would be no, because just our ability to respond to need and really support new people particularly, and then support students and be able to respond consistently, really. It's been a really big change for everyone.
Okay, thank you very much.
Last call for questions for Julie. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we will move along to item 10, board comments and committee reports. So this is our first board information exchange and agenda requests. If we had anyone who had any info they would like to share out on a committee that's met so far this year, or anything you want to bring to the board's attention? Carolyn.
Earlier this week, and I think it was yesterday, but I don't have the best grasp of time, I went to a housing committee meeting just in Freeport on ways we can bring more affordable housing to the area. And I personally know from the perspective of people looking to work in RSU 5, I've known several people that have wanted to apply, but they literally couldn't find a house close enough, and they couldn't pay to transport themselves back and forth. And so I know that's a really important piece, and I do think that's a extremely important piece, especially for us being able to offer that stuff. It wasn't what I hoped it would be, but at least we're talking about it. So yeah,
It's a start. Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn, because that's a good reminder. I I went to a different meeting about housing, and I have some data from that I did not bring with me, but I want to share it because it was more on sort of statewide trends around housing shortages, and also housing shortages related to income level, and it's quite sobering across the entire state, and I think probably to your point, there's no quick fix to it, but I think it's a reality that is important for us to be thinking about, probably as part of our strategic plan of just sort of how does that reality fit into what we're able to offer, who we're able to attract. So yeah, I'll pass that information along to the board.
Thank you. Any others? All right. So do we have, let's see. So we made Kelly the chair, and then we had a meeting without her, and we're going to ask her to oh, you're going to find the same thing happened at finance today. Beth was not there, and she is now the chair. So come to your meetings, folks, otherwise you will be the chair.
I have appointed Malik as my proxy.
Okay.
So Kelly now knows to come to every meeting. Otherwise, she's in trouble. Thank you for showing up to this meeting, Kelly, even after we elected you. So after we elected Kelly chair, Glenn gave an update of summer projects that were done throughout the district. The boiler at Pownell Elementary School was replaced. That was a much needed project. And also at Pownell, the repair of the sewer line, which involved asbestos remediation, happened as well. The septic project will go out to bid this fall and will happen next summer. At the middle school, the freezer and then portion of the gym floor replacement. At Mass Landing, some serious work on the Gaga pit. So, and then some masonry work at Moore Street and at the Durham School, work done in the pollinator area. And I think I touched on everything, but jump in if I missed any of that summer work. Staffing update, there are still 2 full-time custodian positions to be filled, and then a shared custodian and bus driver position. And then just quickly, the energy project update. I know Jean touched on it quickly earlier. Jean and Glenn met with EMC, the company that's doing the energy audit, just to talk about the full scope of the work that's needed. And again, as Jean said, life safety projects will be the priority, and she and Glenn will talk about what those priorities are and then bring them to the facilities committee and the board for approval.
Yeah, the only thing I think I would add is, as sort of the facilities committee starts overlapping with projects that need to be paid for, I think the plan is to have a joint committee meeting between those two in sometime before 2025 kicks off, to kind of talk about these are the identified projects, these are some of the ways we might fund those projects, so that our budget is teed up to accomplish some of the work that audit has outlined. So. And I will also say that the septic system in Pownell, I know the goal was to do that over this summer because there is a serious issue with that. But they have adjusted the existing system to facilitate its use over this year, so that it will be it will be functional through the year until they can start it. And really they could probably start it sooner if wasn't a school full of kids. But we got to wait till the school is empty before we replace the septic. So, Mara, did you have a question? Oh, okay. I felt it. All right. Any other questions for Kelly? All right. All right. Policy. Who didn't go to the meeting? Who's the chair?
Weirdly, I was at the meeting, and I'm also the chair. I'm not sure how that worked. Yes, I'd like to report on the policy committee. The policy committee remains the best committee. It's statistical. Yeah, exactly. We met on September 6th via Zoom, as we always do, and just a reminder that the public is welcome to join us. The public cannot speak or participate at that meeting. If they have any feedback about anything that we're discussing at the policy meeting, that should be sent to the full board so the full board can experience that. But they're always welcome to come. Candy attended as an invited guest, and then, based on her good behavior, we invited her to be a full member of the board again. We reviewed 3 policies, or we reviewed one in depth, and then we kicked 2 down the pike for review in October. We looked at the GBEC drug-free workplace policy, which we'll be discussing a little bit later, and then the EEA, Student Transportation Employee Requirements, Training and Responsibilities, and EEA, Student Transportation Services. We are delaying until October so that we can have the transportation director as part of those conversations. And our next meeting will be held October 4th, 8:45 a.m. by Zoom. Any questions? that. Blake, any questions? Okay.
She will be attending. All right. Hearing none, we will move on to 11, the policy review, to talk about the policy you just mentioned. So do I have a motion for consideration and approval for first read of policy GBEC, drug-free workplace? Kelly, thank you. Malik, second.
Yes, so this is policy GBEC, drug-free workplace. This is one of the policies that we were looking at as part of our regular review cycle. We last looked at it in January of 2017. And this is a policy that's aimed to set in place the both the ethos, the principles, but also the details around it's right there in the title, how to maintain a drug-free workplace, and how the RSU responds to alcoholism or drug dependency diseases. The changes that you see here are primarily pronoun changes that we have made, and then there were 2 changes, if you notice in the 5th paragraph, of any employee who suspects that they may have an alcohol or drug dependency problem is strongly encouraged to contact their supervisor or the human resource coordinator to seek voluntary diagnosis and treatment. We just wanted to make sure that was in alignment with sort of the general practices at the RSU. So it also makes clear that that an employee in that situation has a choice whether they want to approach their supervisor or HR. And the only other added piece was all voluntary referrals shall be kept as confidential as possible given the situation. So just sort of a clarification around that that's not necessarily a universal statement of confidentiality, but as much as is possible given the various criteria and elements that are part of the evaluation by the school. Any questions?
So the human resource coordinator ad is more what the practice is. So we didn't just, is that person equipped to provide referrals? Yes. Okay, great. And then that last piece, the voluntary referrals, as possible given this situation. I guess my concern is if I'm an employee, I like that it says that my voluntary referral is confidential. And I guess I'm not sure what that added piece at the end really.
I could give a specific
Yes,
example. Let me
please.
just
That'd
say.
be great.
So let's get, for example, if there's something that's illegal. For example, we have, let's say, for example, you have someone that's driving a van for us, and they're saying, in my morning coffee every morning when I'm transporting kids to school, I'm putting in alcohol. Then that would have some, certainly that would be something that would rise to, that we would want to know about that. That would be something, or if there was something involved students, if there was something illegal, or those kind of things.
Right.
So it would, in general, if someone's calling and saying, calling our HR coordinator saying, I really need help, I have a drug dependency or alcohol dependency, we're going to help. But if it, when it kind of crosses over into the realm when it's dealing with students at all, then that would be something different, or anything that we would have to report to DHHS, for example.
Okay, so we wouldn't want to basically handcuff our HR coordinator to not be able to tell you if they knew something that was dangerous with kids. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just to say on that point, and this question of how employees are empowered to approach the supervisor or HR was we looked at this at the end. Was it the end of last year, as well? Yeah. So we were looking at this at the end of last year. So we had questions around that procedure, and wanting to make sure that again that balance of recognizing that going back to the initial paragraph of the policy of recognizing alcoholism and drug dependency as treatable diseases and recognizing that, but also then recognizing how that crosses over with the safety of the students and staff.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? More.
I was just wondering about the bath salts, and I see that this was revised in 2017, and I just was wondering if that was at the time, like maybe before they were illegal, so it was called out specifically, separately.
I cannot speak to that. We did not talk about the bath salts.
I guess I don't feel strongly about whether we call them out specifically or not, but I was wondering if we still need to.
Cynthia.
Maybe that's something the policy committee.
Yeah, no, it's
discuss.
good. That's good. No, it's good. But that is one of the. Just so everybody knows, this is sort of exactly the thing that haunts the policy committee. Is the sort of we have these things that are part of our regular review process, and we have the things that we look at, and we know there's something that is in our blind spot that we are not noticing, but it is absolutely appropriate for you to point that out. So thank you for doing so.
And also, is this on? It is? Okay. And also it's a good reminder to like any kinds of questions like that, or any kinds of questions can be sent to Jean the Monday prior to, just in case we can't. But I can answer that, but sometimes it's like you're digging back in time. So I do remember doing this policy back in 2017, and bath salts was added in there specifically because it was, but it's still in the current policy, the current sample policy. They didn't take it out, so it's still called out in that one, exactly as is. So, okay.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. We have a second. If I see no further comments or questions,
Sorry,
we will.
just one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Cynthia, can we move the comma after bath salts to inside the parentheses? Thank you.
You could have emailed her that on Monday.
Ow. Emailed myself.
Note to self, literally. Okay. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. So we have no unfinished business. New business. MSMA fall conference information. So in your packets, it's a boring white paper. And there's a couple pieces of information in there. The first one, the 2 pages, is kind of the overview of the sessions. So this year, it's always the last Thursday and Friday of October. It's in Augusta at the Civic Center. So it's the 24th and 25th this year. And they have a variety of sessions throughout both days. And that first page kind of shows you what your options are for each session. So as you can see, there is a plethora of different things that you, if you're interested in, you can hear more about between Thursday and Friday. Friday, it's done usually about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a little earlier day on Friday. And then Thursday morning, their opening session is when they have their keynote speaker, who's usually a national speaker that on a variety of things. Last year was about AI and education, which was very interesting. And it's interesting that this year his keynote speech is about engagement. So something that's obviously top of mind to us and to Julie.
And I will say I have heard Weston speak before. He is absolutely outstanding. So I think any of the board members that could attend would really enjoy his presentation.
Yeah, so if you have the ability to attend and are interested in attending, we ask that you let Ginny know by next Friday, October 4th, and she will get you signed up. Obviously, it's a two-day session. If you can do the whole thing, wonderful. If you can only do one, that's okay too. I would say it's better than nothing. They're always very interesting sessions, and I always come away with a lot of great information. So that's just your informational stuff. Any questions on the conference? Okay. So we will move on to B, which is the discussion of the MSBA proposed resolutions. So what used to be coupled with that annual conference but has now been separated is the annual delegate assembly, where they vote on members, right, of the the MSBA board. They vote on resolutions, so updates, deletions, and additions, and that's what we're going to talk about now. And then they also vote on changes to the Constitution. Right? Is it Constitution? Is that what it is? Yeah, it is, right? Okay, for the MSBA. So in your packets, 13B is the resolutions as they have been proposed this year and sort of adjusted. Just a little historical background. These used to, there used to be, well, way back when I started on the board, literally the person who was the delegate had they literally got there, read them on the spot, and voted how they felt like voting. Like there was no discussion at the board level, which was, I think, a bit of a challenge. It certainly was for me the year I did it. And then we started actually getting these in advance and having conversations as a board and kind of giving direction to to our delegate, who this year is Cheyenne, and our backup is Maura, since she's there anyway because she's on the MSBA board. Having a conversation around, what's the temperature of the board on these things? Are we a yes or are we a no on these proposed resolutions? Do we want them to make changes? I think we sent Colin one year with if you could get them to revise the whole thing and say this, we'd love that. I'm sure you did it. I don't remember, but I'm sure you got it done. Yeah. So it's sort of evolved over the years. And in the last couple years, when there was lots of people making suggested changes on the floor, they started doing some sessions ahead of time to get sort of early reads from folks on these resolutions. And if they were hearing the same recommended change over and over at these, they were actually revising the resolutions before they even got to the delegate assembly. So I think the process has been sort of refined over the years, and I think it probably makes those meetings shorter. They used to be really long. I guess I haven't been in a while, so they might still be really long. In your packet, in 13B, you'll see what the current proposed resolutions are, right? We pulled these right before she did the package on Thursday, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering if I might just hand it to you. Yeah, I mean, so I probably should have told you that ahead of time. But I know you've been on those calls, and you were on the resolution committee this year, yes? So you're much more intimately involved with these than I am. So.
Okay, so that's okay. Next year I'll remember and try to prepare if I'm on it still. So I think the process for these has also, and the amount of changes has also evolved. I think in the past, we were usually looking at new resolutions, and I think the resolutions committee realized there were a lot of old ones in there that weren't relevant anymore, that maybe some laws had changed, or maybe that were separated out into different resolutions that made sense to combine. So a lot of these ones that are for deletion here in the first section are really just because they aren't needed anymore. And if you had specific questions, so we're actually meeting again tomorrow because there are additional changes. I asked them if we could meet yesterday because I told them we had a school board meeting tonight, but they made it tomorrow. But they're going to be minor changes. But if you do have any questions, I'll be meeting tomorrow and I can come back to the next meeting about that. The property and casualty, you might know that better than I do, Michelle. The CDS moved to public schools. That is happening already, so that's why that one's being taken out. And a special education one, reform one, I don't think I have much to say about that. I think we still have resolutions around special education. We wouldn't just drop that. Was there anything you wanted to say about that one?
Nope. Okay. So that first section is just ones that are being deleted. And then you'll see there, as we go through, some of them, they're for deletion. There's multiple ones for deletion, but basically what they've done is rewritten them to be more inclusive so that they don't have so many separate ones. One thing I didn't realize until I was looking through this is, I mean, when you look at these, some of these were adopted in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Like, they've been around for a minute. So some updates is probably not a bad thing.
So I guess Do folks want me to walk through each one, or do you just want to ask in this section about the revisions, ask questions if you have any about the revisions?
I will say, so on the 9th, I did attend the regional Zoom meeting, and from that, they were just kind of, for a board, they just want us to look over it, and what they do decide and what we do decide as the board, I will bring that forward. So I feel like if we all just kind of look at it independently, and then kind of take our own little notes, and then decide together as a whole, I can take that back.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, and so, for instance, like with the school safety, I know they made kind of a huge little comment on that. So maybe we have something to say about that with the school safety.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one. And that's the first one in here, really, aside from where they took school safety and violence in schools. And then there's gun-free schools and a different school safety, one that sort of combines them. So if folks have any thoughts on 2A, 2J, that would be taking some of the information in the ones where it says accepting the above would delete the following resolution. It's trying to incorporate that into it, the next two into it. And then on gun-free schools, this actually was my suggestion to add, and I think is one of the things we'll be talking about tomorrow, because that section that's highlighted in yellow, I think they got some feedback that it could be political. Personally, I don't feel it is. I suggested that it be added because I think having evidence-based public health interventions supported by MSBA to reduce gun violence in schools and communities is important. But obviously, we would need to hear what the board thinks.
I agree. I think that's an excellent addition. Yeah, I think that's a great addition to the gun safe, just evidence-based stuff. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I just ask a question? Like, what would an example of that maybe be? Just for some, just because I don't know, like, what evidence-based public health has to do with the gun violence. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, so gun violence has increasingly emerged and been studied as a public health issue because there are patterns around where and how it occurs. So I think this is just acknowledging that has become the case. And so if there were things that came up in the legislature, it could be anything, right? It could be, let's not allow guns to be sold. I'm making something up. I don't even know if this is allowed to be sold within 500 feet of schools. Maybe that's already illegal, but let's say there was something to come up like that, then the MSBA board would be like, well, should we get involved in that? I think that's currently kind of the type of one that they would get involved in because it's directly involving schools. But if there were other gun safety proposals, like let's say a red flag law or an assault weapons ban that don't necessarily directly have to do with schools, this is kind of saying they could consider getting involved in those. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would, but I think that would be up to like that committee, the legislative committee, to say, do we want to take a position on those?
Okay, thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Okay, and then the state assessment one is replacing the resolution following it. And then I think that's pretty much the case with the rest of these. So unless folks have questions, they're just sort of rewritten resolutions replacing existing ones just to simplify language, to update language, to revise existing resolutions and combine some that and just instead of having 2 or 3, only have 1. So incorporating them in there. So I'll just skip over those unless folks have specific questions. I will say the multilingual learners one is one that we talked about quite a bit. Updating, because it used to be bilingual education. So kind of shifting the language around that toward multilingual learners, and also how we talk about being inclusive in schools.
So before we move on to sort of the newer did anybody see anything in sort of those consolidation and sort of restating that they don't think we should support or we should talk about a little bit more before we give Cheyenne the green light to thumbs up those?
Or that you might have questions about.
Or if you have questions, yeah.
I'm just curious why on page 7, 2B4E, gender equity, why they didn't, unless I didn't catch this, but why they didn't include, they included a lot of the same language, but they did not include school boards need to stand strongly against discrimination. Why that was omitted this time? I don't know if you remember any discussion around that, Mara.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that this was adopted and amended in the 90s, so I think that at that time that was maybe not the norm. And so I think that there was a feeling that maybe that wasn't needed to be explicit now. Now we're focusing on advancing equity in education, and obviously anti-discrimination is the law, so that's, I think, around that.
I have a little bit of a question, and we may not be able to answer it here. It's just kind of following along those lines. If the legislation changes in the future to contradict one of our resolutions, for example, there are some things coming through that are essentially allowing discrimination, and we really need to stand against that. I just wonder what happens at that point, and maybe that might not be a point for now. That might just be a theoretical, but that's something to really think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's nothing that says, that if that were to become the case, that we wouldn't end up with a new resolution that says, okay, we thought this went without saying, but apparently we need to say it. We stand against this. So, I could go either way on that. I mean, I think it's a strong statement to say that we should be standing against all discrimination. But it is also the law, so.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly take that to the meeting and ask about that tomorrow if you'd like. Okay. Because I agree, just having that statement is powerful and important.
Colin.
Yeah, I think just on that, part of this will be addressed in the new resolutions. But I think I guess it goes to the question of like what really functionally are these resolutions for, I'm totally in support of if we want to add that in. That seems great, but having it there doesn't seem like that. Again, it can't negate law. It can't negate law, and it would only empower us in the future to be able to make other advocacy. So I think just in general, as we look at these things, and again, I'll come to this when we get to the new ones, of like, really, are we saying anything that is truly actionable, that is really something that could be worked with and empowers empowers our representatives to be able to actually do something on behalf of the school boards? Or are we saying nice words to have nice words in there, which is not bad, but just understanding that that's not the same as empowering someone.
I thought the woman who spoke at the Region 7, and I won't do her justice what she said, but basically these resolutions are our beliefs, right? And based on these beliefs, we will take stands, or lobby or advocate in things that support these beliefs. They're not policies, they're not rules, this is what we believe, and this is what's guiding our decision making. I don't know if that helps you at all, but that was what she said, right?
Yeah. And I think that's raising an important question. I think that they set out our beliefs and the policies that we would support, or that the MSBA lobbyist would support, but also I think the ones that they would oppose. So I'm wondering, like last session, when there were some bills, like anti-trans bills, I can't recall how involved that committee got into those. So I think when we're talking about something actionable, like this statement could be relevant to that. And maybe I could just ask about that at the meeting tomorrow.
Just having been the representative, this is going to take a very long time to talk about. Like it's going to be an extremely long. I mean, it's going to be. I can't imagine how it will be over before dinner time because the level of changes here. No, like I'm wanting to. I'm saying this not again to scare you. I mean. But just to acknowledge that like this kind of revision is going to bring out I think is going to bring out a lot of disagreement among the different school boards across the state and the representatives across the state, because that was one of the things that I won't say surprised by, but I just very much noted is just when you in this meeting you get a real sense of really how diverse, if not divergent, a lot of the approaches to running school boards are in the state, and how difficult it is to reach actually any sort of kind of concordance on this. So just to really say that I think it's wonderful that they're doing this level of revision, but it's also I imagine it's going to be a lot of it's very ambitious, and I am curious to hear what kind of comes out through that. Like, what are the voices that arise to potentially complicate some of these things.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Okay, and then there's also one about EPS, which I feel like is just a perennial topic that I wanted to draw attention to. There's actually a session I noticed at the fall conference about it. I mean, there usually is, but this year there's the Maine Education Policy Research Institute is doing a study of it, so I noticed that was at the fall conference. So just around the EPS formula being equitable and distributing state resources, and just acknowledging that there's need for changes and funding.
Yeah, because that's another one that hasn't been amended in, 16 years.
Yeah. Should we move on to the new ones? Did folks have any other questions or anything you wanted to go through on the combination or revisions?
Were you referring to AI in schools, the new resolution?
Yes.
Yeah, page 9.
Yeah.
Yes. So another thing that I think is a hot topic, supporting use of AI in schools, but recognizing that it's not a substitute for schoolwork. It needs to be appropriate. I think this one, my thought on this one is that it's kind of initial, and that this is definitely one that's going to be evolving quickly, but this is just sort of an initial statement about it. I think that there's a lot more I could say.
My initial thought when I read this was that they seem to be maybe leaving out a big piece of the AI universe that's coming out there. And, we've seen some of these situations out in California where students have been using AI in very inappropriate ways. And school boards out there have been, and not just school boards, but legislatures have been working on addressing ways to prevent abuse and misuse of AI to, say, bully students, or, to create deepfake porn or things like that. And so some of the legislatures out there have been working on passing legislation that would be deterring that kind of abuse and misuse. And I'm wondering if that's something that they should be thinking about here too.
I was thinking about that as well, and then I realized that the third sentence, I think, all use of AI should adhere to existing policies, if that's how they're addressing that. That, if there's bullying that's happening through AI, that's against school policy, and so it would be addressed that way. Or
For
if that
sure,
needs
but
to
I'm
be more
wondering in
explicit.
terms of this being a resolution for us to be supporting legislation that might be coming out, we might want to add some language around how we would like to support any legislation that might be coming out that would help deter this kind of misuse in schools.
So you're thinking that would be adding a sentence around support for legislation?
I mean, it depends on what the legislation is, probably, right?
Yeah. Legislation maybe opposing abuse of AI in schools.
Right. The use of AI and online technologies to help prevent abuse and misuse of these technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for again with the added clarification of this is our statement of belief. I think that definitely within that spirit that makes sense. I think that again to Kara's point, my understanding when we looked at our policies in terms of how our policies prepare us for that kind of abuse, for those kind of abuses, what we found. At least when we looked, I guess it was last year, I'm looking at Cynthia, or maybe the year before, was that basically that we couldn't find an instance of when those abuses would be used that wouldn't fall under existing policies, that any of those things fall under either sexual harassment or fall under bullying or I won't be able to list them all. So I'm very curious about that. I mean, I haven't followed the legislation as close, or the legislative initiatives in California as closely, but I'm very curious about why that is, that their current policies don't already protect that and protect it strongly. So I'm going to look into that myself. But just to say, yes, to reinforce what Kara was saying, that I think that yes, I think basically this acknowledges that we're doing everything we were doing before, and also this other thing.
Yeah, for me, this sounds very similar to, when online bullying first became a thing, right? Like it used to be, kid to kid in the schoolyard. And then, we have this whole new technology that opens a whole new world but it's still bullying and it's still not allowed. I think this is more an acknowledgement to say, this is just another avenue we're going to have to keep an eye on and make sure we're aware of. And we recognize the risks. But we also recognize that this is what the future is looking like, and we need to prepare our students to not just pretend like it doesn't exist, but how do we use the tool in an appropriate way as opposed to an inappropriate way, right? So I guess I'm comfortable with the way it's written now as a sort of a statement of belief, but it is probably one that will evolve. Carolyn, sorry.
Just on that. I mean, in terms of I think Kara, you addressed. Mara, you addressed it in terms of this is more of a preliminary statement. But I think my discomfort with it, even just from the academic perspective, is that it's effectively toothless and doesn't actually say anything beyond the bloody obvious, and that is, I think, unfortunately, the state of play in both. Secondary and higher education, that there's still not a lot of understanding of really how to incorporate and how to develop both either new pedagogical approaches to integrating AI, or then how to use the tool or create prohibitions against it. But so I think we should just acknowledge that this doesn't really say anything, and that if we want to be looking for the strategic plan at actually something that is more substantive, it would need to be well beyond this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think this one was really in response to some of the criticisms of AI and maybe some of the more fear-mongering aspects. Like I know Steve Bailey, who's the executive director of MSMA, had an op-ed recently in the paper kind of trying to counter that narrative that yes, this can be used in a way that's abusive, but we shouldn't be assuming that it's dangerous, or we should ban it in schools or something like that. It should be used as a tool to support learning. And I think that it was kind of like a response to sort of an alarmist op-ed that was in the paper. So I think that was kind of why this resolution came about.
So from the regional meeting, I gathered that what they're trying to figure out is how it fits into our schools and into our learning. So, I mean, do you guys know of, you know, teachers that are productively using it in their classrooms and how it's going and anything around that area?
Maybe Phoebe can tell us too.
And I think it evolves. This has evolved like wildfire. If you think about, you know, all the tools that happen, and I think, you know, certainly there's a discussion, particular at the high school level, because there are appropriate uses for AI. And I think that's something for in terms of our teacher. We had a presentation for our administrative team last year. We had some come down and educate us, and we feel there's some education we need to do of our staff. And I think probably our kids in some ways are probably more evolved than some of adults are.
Yeah, I think from my experience personally with AI, I think most teachers have been very like, don't use it. If you're caught using it, you get a 0 on the assignment, or you can reassess to a 50. I think there are maybe a few teachers who have experimented with using it, but I think what I've kind of thought about is that no one's really getting taught how do we use it in a productive way that isn't, you know, blocking like original thinking, but also realizing like this is a part of the world now, and the chances are that a lot of us are going to be using it in the future in one way or another. So I'd really like to get to learn how to use it in a productive way that isn't like harming others or our thinking and stuff like that. So, but so far I would say I haven't seen so much positivity towards it from my teachers.
Yeah, I mean, because I think to Mara's point, you know, sort of the first thought is well, they're just having it write their papers for them, and I mean, and I think that is a fair 0 if you put the question into the thing and it writes your paper for you. But there are ways to sort of access information, and you know, just like we learned with the internet, not all sources are created equal. And how do you fact check your AI information to make sure, you know, I mean, there is probably learning that can happen there, and you know, I think there's a reason it's as vague as it is, right? Because it's like we just don't know yet. It's more just of an acknowledgement that this is something we will be, you know, grappling with.
I think if we were to make one step further, and I can circulate this to the board, but that at Southern Maine Community College, they spent the summer, the task force trying to come up with a system-wide policy for all the community colleges in Maine for how how AI was going to be used in the classes. And I think the point that they reached, which I think is helpful, is clarifying that there basically are tiers of usage that are determined by either the department or by the class, and that is made explicit to the students what that tier is. It's either absolutely no use, or it's use and it's credited, or again, I can't remember what the third one is that's a little bit more intensive. But I could see some language, something around that, of sort of encouraging us to look at making clear in the curricula where AI may be used and may not be used, and just making that explicit for the students' benefit, but also for the staff's benefit. But I think that would take some doing to add that, but I think that would be a step further along. Yeah, Cheyenne's got time.
I wonder if that could be in the form of a policy, not to like throw it back at you, but maybe I could ask about that. I think it maybe has come up around, will there be a sample policy about AI in schools? I don't know how far that conversation has gotten, if superintendents have.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
But if the board feels like that's something we might be interested in, I could ask about that, you know, if they're thinking of putting out a sample policy about AI use in schools.
Yeah, I guess that just brings me to a question about what these resolutions really, the purposes are anyway. Do they, obviously they guide how the MSBA informs its lobbyists in the legislature, but does it also guide school boards and policy committees on how they write their policies? Is that one of the intentions of this? Because the way this is written, it kind of, almost to me, that was kind of my first thought, is that this really kind of seems like something that would really more guide a policy than a legislature.
Yeah, I don't think boards are necessarily, I don't know if beholden's the right word, but, you know, we talked earlier about sort of local control, and that's really a big stronghold in Maine, right? That we don't, every school district doesn't need to be run exactly the same as every other. So, I mean, I guess.
Boards wouldn't be beholden to resolutions anyway.
Right. Right, that's what I'm saying. So when you're asking, do we, should this be guiding how we're conducting ourselves? I mean, I guess if we're a yes vote on this, then by proxy we are. If we don't agree with it, we would tell Cheyenne to vote no, and then in theory we would then not, because we don't feel like that's the right way to go, right? I mean, I think it is mostly to guide the work of that legislative lobby. But to your point, I don't know what they can do with it.
Yeah. I think that's well said, Michelle, because there certainly will be people who vote no on some of these things, or will be school districts who vote no, and then they'll pass anyway, and the school district doesn't agree, and that is not what they want to do in their school district. It's just to really get at what the majority of school districts in Maine believe, and then for the MSBA to represent that in the legislature. So nothing then here, is that the way that, what you're taking away from this, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I'm hearing some, hesitancy on what this will do, but I'm not sure I'm hearing anyone saying they're opposed to having it in place as at least a starting place.
Okay, so we're a yes. We'll tell Cheyenne when she comes back, and we don't, and just as is.
I think so, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any problem with the statement. So I have a lot of experience writing code for what they call AI now. I programmed the interferometers that detected black holes for the first time. It led to the James Webb Space Telescope. Like, I really get this stuff. And the problem with the AI that they have out now, which is really just complex linear code, it is now essentially eating its outputs, and they have slimmed down what those machines are allowed to essentially eat. Because they don't want to have certain information and whatnot, because it isn't helpful to certain people. And so what goes in is already limited, and now it's regurgitating what it eats. It's going to kind of become a parody at some point. So I don't know how much energy we should dump into it right now. I mean, there are going to be some really good uses for it, because complex linear code, there are great uses for it. But I think there's going to be there's going to be a while before we get to that part in society where we really want to put rules around it, because right now it's a free-for-all. It's a disaster.
I don't know if it was irony where you talked about black holes, but that's what I picture. It just like eats itself. All right. So I guess I'd give us a tentative yes on that one. Yep. And not only that, but giving us back the dollars for the years that they did not do that. Yeah. I'm not sure where that money's coming from, but Orno wants it. Yeah.
Is the EPS adjusted for inflation but just not enough? Is that what they? Okay. Okay. Okay, that's fine. It was just, if you knew, that's fine. No worries.
I think, we could probably look at the money districts have gotten in a year where inflation was, 8%. And I'm not sure as a whole funding increased by that much. So I would say if that is in fact the case, I mean, it's sort of a global way of looking at it. I would say it wasn't in fact keeping up. And obviously the allocation changes based on where you are relative valuation to the rest of the state. But, if the total budget for those things wasn't increasing by at least the rate of inflation, then I would say it probably wasn't keeping up.
So the new 3A1 does have that addition.
The EPS one?
Yeah, it says that let's see, it's a really long sentence with a lot of semicolons, but it says it includes the cost matrix of the formula is annually adjusted for inflation. So asking, calling on the governor, commissioner, et cetera, that they are annually adjusting it for inflation. So I feel like that part's addressed in this one, but not the
55%.
Well,
But I mean,
yeah,
that's
it doesn't
already
specify 55,
yeah.
and it doesn't talk about restoring.
Right. Yeah, the callback for the money we didn't get. I'm not even sure how you would allocate that out, but I mean, to me, this this is one that really has not a lot of teeth to we can say anything we want, right? We think they should fund 100%, right? And okay. I'm not sure how you would legislate to that any differently than the EPS one, right? So to Kara's point, I think the EPS one sort of captures the spirit of, okay, we need this thing to stay current. We need this thing to stay fluid and moving depending on what's changing and the actual needs in schools and not, just this, well, we have this number which backs into this number, which is, that's what you got. So I am, oh, sorry. I don't know when anyone in Wiscasset. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the feeling of the board is on this one.
But I guess just to Kara's point, if let's say this one was voted down, but the other one went past, it's functionally the same in terms of, again, statement of belief and in terms of what we're empowering the right. Functionally, it would only be if this one was voted down and then the other one was amended somehow to be like it shouldn't. It shouldn't. It should not keep pace with inflation. Then that would be stripping out any of that. So
I mean, the last sentence isn't in the other one. The restoring of the lost money from inflation. But that seems like a
unless that's
far
really
cry.
Right.
Yeah,
within the realm of possibility.
I'm not even sure the lobbyists could make the case, right? I mean, they could try, but
I appreciate the point that they're making. That
Yeah.
it's like there's been a cut in funding due to failing to keep up with inflation, and that has resulted in large property tax increases and burdens on homeowners. So then with the other EPS one, it does, I don't know if this was previously there or not, but it speaks about alternatives to property tax for raising money to support the cost of education are made available to municipalities. What does that look like? What do alternatives to property tax for raising money to support the cost?
I was just thinking, I'm guessing that it's, oh gosh, now I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, just that because there's been so much outcry about taxes, paying for schools, and that the way it's set up, people don't like the system that's set up because obviously the poorer areas obviously don't have as much money to fund their schools as the areas that have more money. And so I think people, as far as what I was hearing, wanted something that would kind of like be a different way of forming it and taking other things into account. But what that would be, I don't know. So.
Right, is that like a fundraiser? Like having like more fundraisers than what are already happening in schools, or like what does
I
that
don't
look
think
like?
that. I think
don't
it means
know.
like an overhaul of the entire system.
I mean, I guess there's nothing in the Orono submitted one that I'm opposed to. But I guess I would probably, if we had to target our lobbyists, I would rather them sort of focus on the full EPS one, which it does sound like is already happening through the through that research project. But do we feel like this one's necessary, given what we have in the other one?
It does. It does feel redundant for the most part.
Yeah.
Just on that, I bet you we're not the only school board that is thinking that thought, that it's redundant. So I think we could empower Cheyenne to say, if nobody else brings it up, like maybe bring up, we could cut it, but I bet you somebody else is going to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's probably the only no from the revisions and the additions. And we're not sending you in to negotiate any rewrites, so you're welcome. We don't want to make your day even longer. Okay, everyone comfortable with that? And then, of course, if there's any huge changes from their meeting tomorrow, Maura will let us know and we can revisit any ones we need to, but otherwise, feel good? Okay. Have fun. All right. What? 14, personnel. Do you want to get a motion on the floor? Okay. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ an interim director of transportation? Beth? Malik? Thank you.
It is my absolute pleasure to present Mr. Jeremy Arsenal, who will to serve as our interim director of transportation through the end of the school year. Jeremy has been with this district since 1999 in a variety of capacities: bus driver, he's been mechanic, he's been interim director, he's been director, and he is very much willing to support us and support our drivers and our families in getting our kids to school. So I present Jeremy for this position. He has nothing but my highest recommendation and support.
Questions, comments, everybody? Maura?
I'm so grateful that Jeremy is willing to take this role on again. So thank you, Jeremy. I was wondering, and I intend to vote yes anyway, but if he is our current mechanic and if we'll be losing him as a mechanic.
So we've been thinking about how to support Jeremy, and as you know, we didn't have a mechanic for a large part of the year last year either, and he's also he's one of our fabulous Durham drivers. He drives a regular route in Durham and has for many years. So we're finding a way to support Jeremy with some of the real clerical tasks because he simply doesn't have time to do that. So that he can, priority is keep the buses on the road. And a lot of with mechanic work, what we know about our buses now is that it's not. There's some of the simple things we can do, like an oil change or flip out a mirror or put some wipers on. But if the bus, if it's something, if it shows a code, we can't fix it, and we have to send it somewhere else to a dealership to address it because we don't have the machinery in order to do that. So yes, he is a multitasking person. I don't want to burn the man out, so we're finding ways to support him so that he can continue to be successful.
Add one more thing. I just wanted to acknowledge that there had been some challenges with cancellation of bus routes and the changing of bus routes themselves. So I'm just really hopeful that with having Jeremy in this role, that will help address some of those. And I know we still have the shortage, like a lot of school districts around the state, and that is something that we're all grappling with. And I know it's important. We all want the kids to have transportation to school and understand how disruptive it is for families to not have that. So I'm grateful that he's stepping back into this role and hoping that will help with that.
All right. All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. All right. We have even fewer people in the audience than we did before for public comment. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA section 4056A for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter. Cheyenne and Kelly, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? Great.